Just play like, you know, two and a half, 3 minutes of that as an intro.
It has been said that if there is ever to be such a thing as a true universal language, it will most likely be expressed in the realms of mathematics, geometry, energy patterns, and frequency. Could it be that this language, or at least the foundation of it, already exists here on Earth? Is it possible that over the course of thousands of years, we have been somehow guided in the process of creating this new form of communication? And if so, what type of information will be conveyed through it that could not be expressed any other way? In the search for answers, we must be prepared to trek through both time and space, to open our eyes and minds wide enough to notice compelling coincidences, and to stand back far enough to see if the building blocks of some kind of mathematical, spatial, frequency-based language emerge. But before we begin our journey, we will pause here in the present day to notice some of the ways that we measure and tabulate the world around us. This is an important step, for how we count and measure things can be as revealing as why we count them. First, we will take a look at the way we measure time. For all practical purposes, the smallest unit is 1 second, and we all know it takes 60 seconds to make a minute, and then 60 of these minutes to make an hour. This hour, of course, is the unit by which we divide our days, and these days become months, years, decades, centuries, and so on. Speaking of 60, let's take a moment to notice that all geometry, whether it is 2 or 3 dimensional, is also derived from base 60 mathematics that provide the foundation for a 360-degree circle, which in turn provides us with all the angles and formulas for creating virtually every shape known to humankind. Now let's look at how many cultures from all over the world have chosen to count and group things. Right away, we see that we have been attracted to the number 12. 12 eggs in a dozen, 12 months in a year, 12 inches in a foot, 12 signs of the zodiac. Strangely, whether it's tallying disciples or mythical gods, the number 12 appears often in the telling of our greatest stories about ourselves. And what about distance? Your local town might be measured in meters or other units, but when we talk about measuring our planet, the standards we all use revert back to base 60 units of miles, minutes, or geometrical degrees. Are you noticing the pattern here? We seem to be encountering a lot of 12s and 60s. Are they related? And if so, how? To answer that piece of the puzzle, we must travel roughly 5,000 years back in time to visit the ancient Sumerian culture of Mesopotamia.
Far out. This is good stuff. That one is called Sonic Geometry, the Language of Frequency and Form. It's narrated and created by Rankin. He's with us today. He's been on a couple times. He's very cool, very down to earth, doesn't take himself too seriously. He has a great story that he told us about on previous shows where, you know, he really wasn't into anything. And then he just got this download, and now he's, without the 3D matrix formal educational certificates, he is plugged into infinite intelligence, and he is creating some amazing stuff. He's been on Ancient Aliens. Very cool dude. He's partnered up with a very cool chick, Jen Reynolds. So let's get him up here right now and see what's happening on his end of the apocalypse. There we go. Oh, wait. No, you're good. I can see you. You're muted, though. You're muted. Bottom left, that icon, the microphone icon.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, there you go. What's happening, man?
Hey, how are you?
I'm just hanging out by the pool, drinking margaritas.
Don't we wish?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You got.
Where are you right now? Are you in Florida?
No,
in Indiana?
We left Florida. Last time I talked to you, I was in Florida. Yeah, we left Florida May 28th. Well, Morgan flew. I drove, and so we were in Arkansas. We're in Van Buren, Arkansas, which I was inexplicably brought to when I left everything behind October 13th, 2016, brought to the same little town right outside of Fort Smith But anyway, we have some friends here. We met some friends here. We were pulled back here a couple more times, and this place found Morgan basically. She knocked on the door, and the lady said, "Hi, my name's Morgan Lee. Would you like to see the place?" And she says, "Well, my name's Morgan Lee." So
Wow.
I guess so. Yeah. But yeah, so we're here. We're going to be here. I don't know. It's it found us, and for the first time in 3.5 years, we have a home base. So
I like Arkansas. My dad was born there, and I've been many
Oh, yeah.
times. And yeah, I there's a certain energy to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Of course, the crystalline energy. There's something
Yeah.
going on there for sure.
Yeah, to me, it's like, having been to Sedona and Shasta, and of course other places, to me, it's kind of like a Sedona Shasta energy, but it's kind of under the radar, like it's going to rise or something. I don't know. I've known some
Yeah.
people that are moving here. I've known 2 that have moved here in the last 3 or 4 months. So looks pretty cool. So we're going to be based out of here and still going to travel a little bit. We're going to go to Sedona the last 2 weeks of September. I'm going to go up there and speak at a conference and try to put a couple other co-creations together. So maybe you guys can jump in the house on wheels and see what happens.
In the stealth camper. I think
Mhm.
September is pretty booked up, but I know our paths will cross soon.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, the thing about you, and I really want to jump into the sonic geometry, because since the last time I talked to you, I don't spend a lot of time. I don't spend more than usually more than 4 or 5 minutes on a video, most of them are like talk show formats, because I like to study other people and all that. But
Yeah.
yours, that I've been looking at them. I mean, off and on, I'll go in and watch them when I'm doing something. And it's like, I don't know, it's not even the words that you're talking. It's just the whole experience. Like it's
Yeah.
telling me something that I don't know. It just seems very familiar. And, yeah, so I want to get into that, but also I just wanted to touch briefly on just you, Eric, because of course I know Jen, I know you, through the internet. And she's very much tells it like it is, and doesn't take herself too seriously. You're the same way. You're actually even more that way, and it's just cool observing the higher self coming into somebody, because we know your story. You downloaded all that stuff from Infinite Intelligence, and you still are, like so many people are, but you're still human, man, and you just don't take yourself too seriously. And it's so amazing how in a natural flow, in a casual way, in a relaxed way, where you even laugh at yourself, you can really illuminate the grid. And I know you hooked up with some of our friends over the last couple of months, and yeah, and I just want to say, yeah, somebody's seeing it. I enjoy it, and to me, that's what it's all about. So,
Well, thank you. I think our true purpose here on Earth is so unique that we are the only creatures, possibly dolphins and whales, but humans for sure. And we can communicate this idea to each other that we are supposed to be both. We are supposed to be aware of large principles of what we would call spirituality, contemplating source and how this came to be and what God might be and how we continue our story for a long period of time. Hopefully hold that energy and consciousness, but also be fully here and present in the earth plane, in the 3D world, enjoying the gifts that it is, whether sometimes those gifts show up as challenges or painful experiences or trials and tribulations like we're going through on a global scale right now. But I believe the more my path unfolds before me, that we are supposed to be both at the same time. And I think the master of that, who was modeling that, would have been a Jesus, that close to almost fully aware, so close to aware of what God is, that he called God his father, and he considered himself the son, and yet also walked the earth in a very simple way, lived a very simple life, was not attracted to wealth or fame or fortune. And I just think he modeled the invitation, if nothing else. I don't consider myself a Christian as most dyed-in-the-wool born-again Christians might think, but I continue to read the Gospels, and I am very inspired by people like Jesus, sharing and modeling this walk between both worlds at the same time.
And I bet he laughed a lot too.
I bet he did. I'll bet there was some humor. You got to think that God has a great sense of humor. When you look at timing in your life, sometimes you just go, really, whether you believe it's angels or something, and it's coincidence or synchronicity, you almost have to laugh and feel like there's a sense of humor in the process of what we would call creation.
Yeah, which goes back to not taking yourself too seriously, which you bring out so well. So many people do. There's certain people that just have this certain sense of humor that just brings you, people talk about grounding, and it just grounds you, like in the moment, like, oh my God, and you pinch yourself. But yeah, and I like what you're saying too, because, well, I mean, our second hashtag here is the human is a hero. And if Todd's feeling radical, it's the human is the FKN hero. But, I feel the same way, because I feel like, okay, whatever we're remembering and becoming more aware of, well, we came into this experience with that. What we didn't come into this experience with is the experience we're having. So the first thing we're going to miss when we leave is not going to be the stuff that we forgot, but what we can't go back to, So yeah, I'm all for it. Absolutely.
Well, when you use the word hero, that's the almost like the other shoe to drop, I think, in this experience.
Yeah.
Not only we're supposed to tread both realms, but the hero's journey, as described by Joseph Campbell. So he's the guy that wrote the Hero with a Thousand.
Yeah.
And he created this template. He didn't create it. He saw it. Humanity had already created the template, the storyline of what we would call the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell just happened to be this degreed guy, a philosophy major in the late 20s, early 1930s, that traveled the world and saw this story told throughout every culture of an unlikely, unassuming human being called to some great mission.
Yeah.
And it is to get a thing or a piece of information or something that is going to be very trying in the process. He's going to be met with some accomplices that are as unlikely as he or she is. They go and encounter the difficulties, the challenges, get the thing. And if they're lucky, they come back with it the first time. Often, if they go back 2 or 3 times to fully get all of it, the saga continues. But when they come back, they have this thing that is valuable to the community that they started from. In a nutshell, that's the hero's journey. And I think that is a microcosm of what our experience is. I believe the human race in its entirety collectively is the hero on this unlikely journey.
Absolutely.
Discovery of something profoundly important to add to our multi-dimensional community of extraterrestrials or whatever. We have something of value to contribute in our journey of being the unlikely, lowly, pooping, burping, farting, sweating, fearful state. There's yet something that we have to contribute to the greater, scheme of things.
Yeah, we come from the same branch of the tree of life. I can tell you that right now. I thought about it today when I was looking for pictures. I was looking for pictures to put up on the post, and I saw you with this guitar and all these people around you. And then you're on the beach, and I thought, oh, that's it right there. How can I capture that? But I tried to go with something, that I didn't anyway. But I totally get that. And I remember in the late 80s, because I love Joseph Campbell. I love him. And I read a lot of him in the 80s. And he had this series of interviews with Bill Moyers on PBS. I think it was entitled The Power of Myth. And so to take that, like, scholastic, degree, and then break it down like that. Yeah, very, very, very powerful stuff. But I agree. I think that, I remember, between my own downloads a couple of weeks ago and other people's, and just reading the field, the whole thing coming in, like, you guys are in a space now, and I want to say it's a summer, you're in a space now where we've given you all the code and information and downloads. You're now entering the space. We can't even tell you what to do. You're actually going to create this new template, this new blueprint, this new everything by the decisions you make in the moment as you align your free will with the universal will. And
we're watching, speaking for them, we're watching, and we've heard that word all the way back to the Bible, the watchers, and what you end up learning is going to affect us. We are going to learn what you have learned in your process.
That's right. That's it. That's what I was getting to. Yeah, that's the feeling of it. I remember I got something like that. And by the way, Jen said you're hiding in the closet.
I am. This is
I would
the
do the
drape
same
in my closet. You know it. You've been here.
I knew that was that place. I could feel the energy.
Yeah.
But no, and it isn't so crazy, because even with an explanation like that, and you're like, wow, that's, and it's true. I remember my higher self coming in saying, I'm learning as much from you as you are from me. But I really feel like this summer something happened, like we flew out of the nest and we're creating this thing. We can fall because there's nowhere to drop to. I mean, it's like we're coming into this, and I'm with you that big shoe that's going to drop is, we're actually going to discover ourselves to to a degree that we could never comprehend, because so much comes with it.
So listen, we'll bring it back to sonic geometry, because to me, it's the greatest mystery of all mysteries in our experience. What a field of information that I happen to call sonic geometry. But people were already on the path of it. Pythagoras, 2,500 years ago, the father of modern frequency tuning, mathematics as we understand them, geometry as we understand them. He has a famous quote that most people have heard the second half of. There's music in the spheres. It's actually, there's music in the spacing of the spheres, but the quote begins, there's geometry in the humming of the strings. If you consider that the sign outside the rabbit hole, inviting you in, when you start putting together coincidental pieces of evidence, and they're very much aligned with Joseph Campbell, because in his worldwide discoveries, he saw that there were number sequences. He called it mathematical mythologies. He couldn't deduce what was trying to come through in the mathematical mythology, because technology had not advanced enough in the 20s and 30s to show how relevant some of these number sequences that have haunted humanity, almost been planted in the human experience like Easter eggs in a movie, but it's a 6,000-year-old movie that the human race, has been living through. These numerical number sequences have been hinted at and planted into our consciousness. And when you put it all together, whether we're learning exactly what it is we're supposed to learn as a finished product or not, I don't know. But what you really learn is there is an intelligence trying to communicate to us through number sequences. And that is enough to blow your mind wide open, just right, because it starts feeling like irrefutable proof. Like, unlike the pyramids we have these giant stone monoliths that we don't understand how they were built. But when you start seeing these coincidental number sequences held in all these cosmological ways, historical ways, architectural ways, geometric ways, frequency ways, and that they blend together and lock. It's not like, oh, this is sort of related and isn't it similar? They do this.
Like a Rubik's Cube.
Yes.
Like
and
Rubik's Cube.
When they do that, you have to just stand back from the information and go, the number one thing coming through when I see this locked together, it is that there has been an intelligence that planted those clues for us to discover, put them together, merge them, and start experimenting with. And that's where we are right now.
Yeah. Is there, I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but this just came into my field like a few days ago, and I think it was through a couple of conversations, but is the root of it binary, like the 1 and the 0?
Well, binary seems to be, as far as we understand it at the moment, a force of nature. It's very simple. So binary, rather than thinking about it as ones and zeros, you can think of it as push and pull, or up and down, positive, negative, dark, light. Those are all binary expressions of the way force can work to use frequency to glue things together, to hold form into pattern, and somehow that pattern gets skinned to become things, what we would call matter. You break it down, you're right back at energy that has no matter in it. And when you go atomic, it's just right back to energy, but somehow combined with frequency and this binary essence of nature throughout what we know as the universe, that somehow seems to hold form into place. And that form being held into place eventually becomes a solid, becomes a star, planet, rock, tree, human, whale.
Yeah. almost like the root of it being physical and non-physical, and the one represents something that's there that you can put on a, you know, a ledger, and a zero is nothing. So you're either
Zero, it could be the ether.
something or nothing, right?
Yeah, I like talking about Jesus in the book that did not make it into the canonized Bible, in the Gospel of Thomas. That's
Yeah.
Jesus just saying things. There's no miraculous birth. There's no death on the cross. It's just Jesus, this mystical teacher, saying things, and his disciples are getting ready to go out and spread the good word of that Jesus has come and is sharing the word of God. And then we say, how do we describe you to people as we go into these towns? And he says, tell them I am motion and rest. And to me, that was a light bulb moment. Yeah. Says, yeah. This guy truly gets it. And that's also like a binary process. But think of the ones and zeros. One would be the exhalation or the motion, and zero would be the rest, the expansion, or the ether. You could break it down into the 5 elements. That goes beyond the 2. And all of a sudden we have the 5 platonic solids representing earth, water, air, fire. That's as it's starting to differentiate, as the ones and zeros start to differentiate and become the elements as we know them. But there's still the 5th element that is the ether, the same ether that might be the 0 in the binary code system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even the word inertia, like because like, you know, inertia is I've seen it in the dictionary. I think it's physics definition is something moving without obstruction, you know, and then of course an inert gas, which doesn't move at all, right? I mean, so, you know, that binary, I'm glad you explained that, because that goes way beyond the numbers 1 and 0.
Yeah,
it does.
And inertia, the truly there's not quite a thing as inertia in that way. Physicists reach a certain wall, including Einstein, and I'm no physicist, but I've reached many walls in my journey. But before, if you want to think of a big bang, there had to be something for the big bang to bang into. And that had to have some properties of tension, of density somehow that we don't understand. We might call it dark matter these days, but we don't understand when that explosion, and it could have just been an explosive thought of creativity, it had to have a void to explode into. That of explosion had to have already pre-existing a void of darkness, but that is not meaning that it has no impedance on inertia. It actually has a slowing process, and that's what starts creating, it's that friction that starts creating torque and tension and spin. Spin, you may as well just call spin God or waveform, because that's the birth of it, is energy expanding outward, meeting some sort of resistance of some kind, and that creates a vibration, a frequency.
Which then creates something, births something, everything. Right? So like, I get what you're saying. So like, people talk about the mother goddess, or they talk about Father God or Father Universe, Mother Universe, you know, the womb. You know, I often write a meme every now and then just to get, mostly to see what people will do, that if God has a gender, God is a woman. But so all those questions, but what you're actually saying is, it's not the feminine, it's not the masculine, it's the space that they create in between, the friction that they create in between, and then which ultimately birth, you know, has to explode like the Big Bang.
That's a beautiful way of expressing it. And think of the yin yang symbol or the Vesica Pisces, when 2 circles merge. It is that space between, that dividing line, the hair's width between dark and light. But you need both. You absolutely have to have
both. You can't have anything without one or the other, right?
That's right.
So there we have,
that's
with
right.
you have to have them. So there you have the chicken and the egg. So, you know, and it's like, who cares? Let's find that space. You know, I'm just curious from like well, just because I'm curious, you know, like, what's a day in the life like for you? Like, I know your story. I mean, I know your story. I know you're involved with that you've been involved for a long, long time with the radio program, radio station. You know, I know that you're very active. You know, I know that you visit, you know, different conferences. You speak at different conferences. You've been on Ancient Aliens. I mean, you just do a lot of different stuff. You're so unassuming. You're just so, humble. And, but like, so are you like getting this stuff at more and more elevated levels every day since you got those original downloads?
It sort of feels like that. I grew up. My dad was a banker. He bought a boat business in 1973, and I was 13. I thought I was going to be in the boat business my whole life. I loved it. I love boating to this day and being out on the ocean or lakes. Yet in 1990, the yachting industry I had become a part of. I was a Coast Guard licensed captain, driving a Corvette around and living in a nice house and married with a son.
California dreaming, maybe.
The California dream, pretty much, in Newport Beach, California. And in 1995,
my heart bleeds. I'm sorry you had to go through such a traumatic experience.
Yeah, my life has been non-challenging. I feel people that have lived through challenges are the other end to help people out in an empathic way that I could not. I can say, I know what you've been through in this painful struggle with addiction or loss of, people close to you or a devastating job loss. I have not been through those things. But in 1995, I did have a health condition, and it was pretty severe, I guess. And I was contacted by a spirit being because the protocols where I was going to have this surgery that was very invasive and not very successful back in that day. And this feminine voice whispering in my ear said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you through this. And procedure was performed on me that night. And I woke up the next day 100% pain-free and have been pain-free, at least spinal issue-wise, since then. That opened a door to something else happening, that we are all participating in another form of reality that a lot of people want to think is there, contacting angels or, listening to spirit guides or whatever. And I've never pushed it up until including Ancient Aliens or Gaia TV or any of the conferences. I have never once reached out to them. They have contacted me. I am not a guy. I feel if I was a pusher, I could have a real income stream.
Absolutely.
Of lecturing about what sonic geometry is, because lo and behold, I'm the guy who discovered something really important, correlating geometric sum totals and frequencies. And it did just come to me as a download. But I will tell you, my life has been my job. I still have a job that I have and make money in a traditional way. I rent office space, but it allows me lots of time to pursue or just relax into the things I want to pursue or relax into. And this information, sonic geometry, spirit things, going to Burning Man, opening up to a whole different way of living life with less. Now I live in a small apartment that you stayed in. I had a big house, 5-bedroom house and a giant mortgage. And at the same time, I had a boat and a motorcycle and a classic car and all these vehicles and a motorhome. And I was juggling all those things. And I feel so much more free when I can be fluid, because that information is trying to come to all of us. And I think probably discussed this quite a bit. That information is there. Whether you call it out in the Akashic field or it's just out in the universe, we are a part of it. And if we are a part of it, we should understand in some fundamental way how we came to be here. And we are on that quest. When we say we want to know what God is, we want to know what spirit is, we want to understand the universal principles that created everything. We have a yearning, burning desire that defines the human experience. Yeah. And that's our quest. That is our hero's journey. And that information is out there and it is coming to us. And somehow why this geometric aspect, because I failed geometry in high school, I barely took a few classes in junior college and none of them were math. That this information would be geometric in nature and physics oriented in nature, that it was not me. So I knew that it was coming, quote unquote, outside of me. And yet we're living in this field.
Yeah. And you would think that, a lot of people, including myself, when the information first came in, it was almost like biblical or galactic, or and yours is not even a language. I mean, it is a language. It's a language of languages, you know, because it involves so many things. But one of the things that I really like about, even if you look at the presentation at the beginning of the video that I played as the intro, which by the way was only 3 minutes out of about 33 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you look at some of the patterns and loops that we all have been subjected to, that, in other words, that kind of involve all of us. And it could be labels, it could be going to work 9 to 5, it could just be a lot of different things at higher and higher levels. And you see people talk about, oh, well, they had the information, so they put this in place. But the stuff that you bring to the table is like coming from a higher level. It's not a program, it's just the way things work, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the whole thing about the beginning in the intro, you know, when you talk about 60 and 12, and you can just go on and on and on. There's something about that to me. Like when I was watching it, I remember spending, you know, 3-4 years watching videos into the conspiracy, disclosure, and just the archons, fourth dimension, all that. But when I was looking at your stuff, I was like, wow. So it looks like somebody could try to emulate that whole natural perfection of the 60 and the 12 and all that, but there's no way they could sustain it.
No.
Like there's something so deep in it and so pure that you can't F with it. Like it's just going down. It doesn't matter what you do, either get in line or get dragged, you know?
Right. It is, we were gifted, when you're talking about the 1260, that is a counting system that was gifted to humanity roughly 6,000 years ago. You would think that we would be all base 10 metric because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes. If we were very elemental beings and we were trying to count things, you would think we would have automatically gone 10, 20, 30 or halves of that and hundreds. Virtually the metric system should have been the first thing that we came up with. And yet at a time when all these other firsts were showing up on our planet. And so we're going back 6,000 years ago. We're not going to talk about how did the pyramids get here? How did these monolithic structures? We're talking about at 6,000 years ago, what most of the human experience looked like all over the world. It was very much a hunter-gatherer experience. Yeah. People living very simply. They weren't yet farming. They weren't building complex structures. They were following food source. They were following clean water. They were following good weather. And then all of a sudden, in one place in the world, Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, we get not the advancement of technologies, we get the invention of many of the technologies we use today, including this 1260 math system that gave birth to algebra, calculus, physics. We got the world's first written language. It was called cuneiform, but we can read it today.
The Sumerians, right?
Yes, we got the first arch, the plow, the first pottery wheel, the first wheeled and axled vehicle, the first pyramid, the first multi-story building, first sailboat. I mean, it's like, how in the world would you go from zero and invent all these things that's going to launch the human experience, the modern human experience from here? And they wrote it down and they said, we didn't invent it. These beings, these people came from the sky and showed us this stuff. They gave us this information. They called them the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki literally means from those who came from the sky or kin of sky visitors. And even in the Bible, the word something very similar to Anunnaki. Moses is sending out scouts and they go to Canaan, which they're about to invade after wandering the desert for 4 years. And Moses says, how is it? And he says, oh, it's great once we get there, but it's not going to be easy because the giant Anak race is still living there. And they're big, they make humans look like grasshoppers in comparison in size. That's in the Bible.
Yeah,
so
I know.
We're getting this story that our modern human story is actually launched by an extraterrestrial visitation event, whether you want to believe it or not.
Well, I mean, there's so much evidence of that. I don't know if you follow a fellow Los Angeles, Robert Sepper at Atlantean Gardens. Oh my God, you've got to look at his stuff. He's an anthropologist. He's totally independent, and he brings so much to the table. Very, very neutral in the way he presents everything, but he presents everything. And, you know, just from like watching, he's probably got like 300 videos. I've probably seen 90% of them. But one of the things that I picked up from him, and I've seen it in other places, is there's many instances around the world, mostly through oral history, at least in the beginning, maybe hieroglyphics, where there's been a civilization like the Dogons or the Aborigines or the Hopis, where all of a sudden there's this huge, you know, explosion of technological advancement, be it farming, fire, you know, just different. And I want to ask you about this because it really intrigues me. So, and I know the story of the Sumerians. I've followed it quite a bit, even up through Egypt and some of the similarities and stuff, and a lot through his work. But it always seems like they bring the stuff to the table, they live amongst the species, so to speak, and then they leave. And it's almost like they're pushing us out of the nest, and you're on your own now. You know, people talk about Atlantis and how the technology was very advanced, and then, you know, and so on and so on. Do you, yeah, I guess it's a multifaceted question, but do you think we're in that space where maybe we've been pushed out of the nest and it's time to see what we can do? And
Yes.
we might have a real opportunity to maximize our potential?
Yes. Part of the Anunnaki story is, and even again corroborated in the Bible, is that there was a humanoid species living on the planet that had been here maybe a million years. I mean, you can follow the anthropology, but there was more or less genetic tampering done by these more advanced interstellar beings that ended up being called the Anunnaki. Maybe they called themselves that. We don't know. But you got to think of for what purpose. One, that's almost the most important thing. Is like why, because that gives the meaning to the whole thing. There's two versions of the story, or actually many. Some people think of the Anunnaki as the beginning of the end of human civilization because they were the creators of us, not just the monitors of us. They actually created what we look like now. And some people, Zecharia Sitchin, who could read cuneiform, pulled enough out of the tablets and said we were just created as a slave race.
Yeah.
We're created by these demiurges. We weren't created by the big capital G Almighty God. We were created by these smaller entities, more or less, almost like advanced versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
Or anybody would poo-poo that idea. Just think of our experience, what we've done in the last 500 years, the blink of an eye. If an archaeologist was studying modern humanity, we have split the atom. We have diced up the genetic code. We understand how DNA works. We can clone. And think of where we could be in another 500 years.
Even if you go back 100 years.
Yeah, right. Only go back 100. But think be in 500 or 1,000 years, we could very well be the same type of creator gods.
Yeah.
And yet we were,
and maybe, and maybe
bone ourselves.
Yeah. And maybe that's a copy, you know, when you read Made in the Image, maybe they're just duplicating what was done to them.
I think that's a possibility, but here's my supposition, because it's important, and I don't know how much time we have.
We got plenty of time.
Why would we be created if these are advanced beings, far more advanced than us? They're still using the same forces of nature. They're still using what we would call binary force: push, pull, spin, torque, electromagnetism, forces that are already out there in the universe, but they have figured out how to manipulate them to actually create things. We have not mastered that yet. But so you think, why would somebody that advanced, a species, a race, create something less advanced, but be gifted with consciousness and free will? To me, there's only one reason you would do that. You're on a quest, you have not learned something, and you think that there could be something to be learned by the experience that you are creating.
So the same game we're playing, looking for external gratification, so to speak, be it with your pain or your pleasure. And I would say that's really thought-provoking what you're saying. And then again, going back to Made in the Image, you know, I mean, if we're stepping into, let's just say we're stepping into a god, goddess awareness and all the skills, abilities, creative, alchemic, magic, all that goes with it, what would you do? Kind of like the old thing, what would Jesus do? What would you do as God, as the goddess? And
Right.
what else would you know but to emulate that, what you know of yourself? And then what I love about your explanation too is maybe there's an unconscious aspect within them that's not fulfilled in this egoic mind or whatever it may be, whatever the other side of it that creates that friction, that is that space that you call, you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
thought provoking. You know, I wanted to ask you too. Go ahead.
Oh, well, before you hold on to your thought. So before we make tangent off of it. So these creator gods, there is a story around them, who they were. And the two highest of them had names, Enki and Enlil.
Yeah, right.
And no matter which one, I've read reports and stories where one is quote unquote the good guy and one is quote unquote the bad guy. I've heard them both described in either way. But what we do have is polarized expressions. So these are advanced beings, but they're still aware of polarization, and they even model it. They model polarization to the point of arguing with themselves. And they create us, and half of them, either the Enki or Enlil side, says they are created of us, they are of the universe, they're made of universal forces, they deserve to understand what they are, how powerful of co-creators they are. And the other one says, maybe eventually, but not now. They, in the moment, they're just one step above monkeys running around, living in a state of fight and flight and fear. This is not the time to let them know what they really are. So both of those forces, depending on how detached and how far away you got from this vision of it, are good. Neither one is, not one is good and one is bad like Star Wars. They both think they are serving the greater expansion of the universe, one by allowing us to see what we truly are, the other one by throttling our experience, because we're just not ready. I would actually, in many ways, agree with the throttling story. Where we are right now, our humanity's collective consciousness does not seem to be on par with our technological ability. As soon as we figured out how to split the atom, the very first thing we did was make a devastating weapon out of that technology. That tells me that maybe we aren't ready to rise up, to up level into the next realm of knowingness. And yet, I think we're also vibrating at this critical level. It says if they don't do it now, they might just blow out. They might just flame out under the weight of their experience, the weight of fear driving their existence, expecting the weight of greed and power and control, monetization, more or less keeping us enslaved, the few keeping the many enslaved. It's like they need to bust out now, whether they're fully ready or not. And I think that's describes this wonky, kind of tragic moment that we're living through COVID and through the collapse of economy. Is this all has to happen for us to be able to clear the field enough for us to up level. And I think that's what's truly available to us. The clues have been there. We're synthesizing them. We're putting them together. We're putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We're looking at the picture in front of us, and the gods are still fighting about it. It's like, holy crap, they're there, and they're still fighting and arguing and living in fear and separation of each other. And the other side is going, dude, we got to do this now. We got to let them come through.
And maybe, you know, as you're explaining all this, I'm like, I can see it visually. I'm going to try to put it into words, but like, and maybe it's the force of what we call God.
Yeah.
In other words, what you described is Inky and, you know,
and Lil.
Maybe one is the one and one is the zero. And maybe when what we call God decided to start stepping out, and by the force of that intention, created those two parts to create that space in between, which is actually created in the moment. And maybe, as you're describing from a metaphoric level, the Anunnaki, the gods that you were just referring to, still trying to work it out. Maybe that's the friction, the two parts that create the friction. And we're, like you said, one side sees it this way, one side sees it that way. But what do they say when they talk about the truth? There's three versions. There's one side, the other side, and what really happened.
Right. And even what really happened probably could be dissected by physics or something to go, did it really even happen that way? I mean, we want to talk about truth. I think that you had alluded to it earlier on, but there's the big G God, the creator of all of it, and that keeps filtering down. Oh, it's did they put us here and then step back and just watch? Yeah. I think part of that has been part of the story. If you go back to like even Star Trek and think of the Prime Directive, it's like you can't over meddle in the experiment, pollute the experiment if you over meddle in it. Sometimes you just have to put the elements in place and observe rather than tinker too soon. You wouldn't come up to invaluable science. I think our experience probably has been that these creators have been observing us. I think that's why there's the word watchers in the Bible, or observers. And I think the story is getting so interesting right now, like the plot twist of the story, the most exciting, almost the climax of the story is happening on Earth right now.
I agree.
And they're here in mass. I mean, they are gathered right now.
It's like the greatest show in the multiverse.
This is the show.
Because they're
it's not like the greatest show on Earth. The greatest show is Earth.
Because everybody's coming into further alignment. And as you're talking about this again, I can totally visualize what you're saying, because it'd be almost like, okay, I am the big G, and I create this into motion. And it would be like with with what you were talking about in that example, that interference. It'd be like creating a chess game and pulling for one side.
Right.
There's no way. So you have to, and if you look at it, I remember when I was getting my downloads 9 years ago, and I kept hearing, you cannot miss a step on the soul highway. There cannot be a shortcut. You cannot have an intervention. You can have a divine intervention or divine episode to open up memory or code or whatever you want to call it, but you can't take a shortcut. And I think if we're getting to the point where we're actually coming into awareness of what our true nature is, why would it be so far beyond the realm of possibility that whatever it is that we're referring to, be it Anunnaki, be it ancestors, whatever's taking part in observing this, why would it not be any different for them? Would our awareness not be, our evolution of awareness not be paralleling their own? I mean, yes. It just seems the way it would work in the universal spectrum, that whatever level you go into, proportionate to where it's at, maybe how old it is or whatever the case is, that it's all going to be the same.
I agree completely. And here's the story that I've been told in many different ways. We're kind of getting into like the upper level of all my communications, all of my channeling experiences, all of my, what I would call contact moments, is the message that all galactic beings throughout the entire universe are standing at the same cliff and looking out into the abyss and going, yeah, we can do this, that, and the other thing. We no longer need spaceships to travel. We're pure consciousness. We're pure energy. We can create anything we want, any size planet, we can create infinite things. And we're using these forces, push, pull, gravity, electromagnetism, but frequency. We don't know the source of those frequencies. That's what Big G is the source. So if let's say where we are right now, because it seems very tangible and real, that we are following an AI storyline arc. We do things for logic's own sake. When Elon Musk creates something, he looks very AI, and he's following a logical process. Well, if we could do this, we would know more. And if we knew more, then we would do this. And it's all about efficiency. That's why it's amazing that a private individual has made an electric car so efficient that it taught the automotive industry how to do it. He taught NASA, retaught NASA how to make something so efficiently works beautiful in the space program. So efficiency becomes the guideline and logic. And we start following efficiency's model. And as we do that, Amazon is a very efficient model, but it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for the human experience. It takes the weak forces, manufacturing cars. Robots are way better in an efficiency model than humans doing it that need breaks and vacations and insurance and sick days and all that stuff. So think of our species following the logic model all the way, and now go 1,000 years, 10,000 years, a million years into the future, following logic for logic's own sake. You become like Dr. Spock in Star Trek. At some point, you all reach the same cliff, no matter how great you were at using all of the forces of nature, all the God forces. And you stand there and go, geez, we're great at this. You have an existential crisis of like, yeah, we're great at it, but why are we doing it? And two, who created those forces that we're using to create other things? So you have to almost, in that moment, you almost have to abandon the logic track, logic for logic's own sake, and say, what is the most illogical thing we could do? How about if we take some of our consciousness and put it in these finite little physical forms living on a planet, and they're full of weak, what we would call weak and almost disgusting habits, pooping and peeing and farting and belching and snot, and they got to eat and sleep and get sick, and the physical body dies. Why would we create that? And much less, why would we? Well, to me, there's only one answer. There's something to be learned in that experience. There's something profound in the experience that we are living through.
Maybe it's taking it to a higher level about where you were talking about. We're talking about at the top of the show about not taking yourself too seriously and being able to laugh. Maybe we're just the dog chasing its tail, even on the most grand universal level with all of our multidimensional aspects, which is to come back to a point of just saying, I'm never going to effing know. I surrender.
Yes. And you know what? That might be, you might have just hit it on the head, is that we are supposed to, at some point, rather than go, can we cuss on a podcast?
Absolutely. This is Soulology.
So we're the fucking masters of the universe.
That's right.
We don't surrender to anything or anybody, and yet we don't know who God is.
Yeah.
Well, let's create a species that is not the master of the universe, that is full of questions, that is full of fear, full of not believing that they're going to stay alive unless they kill other people and animals. And let's see what they come up with. You might have just hit it on the head. We have to surrender to it without engaging all logic all the time and think we can think our way through it.
Our
whole story.
Total, the opposite of resistance. I mean, total surrender, which is, I think, in little ways, we're all doing that. We're all like, people talk about, I'm having to give up my family, I give up my job. I surrender. I don't know what to do. I surrender. I'm being told to go, sell all my stuff and move across the other side of the world, or whatever the case is. But to me, that would make sense. And to me, that would be the big cosmic, the big cosmic humor, the laugh would be, all this time. And I love your explanation, because you've got this creator creating who creates another, and it just keeps going. And now here we are, we think we're the lowly humans. Maybe we're even perceived as that. But as this story's unfolding and we're coming into our awareness, what they're starting to rise in their awareness and their understanding too, is they're looking at this microbe and it's actually coming into its God essence, and to come to a point and say, I surrender, because you're never going to know.
Right. And think of what we call God. How does what we call God even know? I mean, right. And think of what we would call weak forces. I mean, if you're building cars and you have the choice of a robot or a person, and you think, what makes a person not a good robot to build cars. Well, they're sentimental. They have feelings, they have memories about the way things used to be. That's not just in physical form. That's in our mental, emotional state.
Yeah.
That could be the value too. Surrender would be a part of that, but those are things that could very well be looked at as fallible forces, that you're sentimental enough that you would sacrifice your own life for someone else, or that you feeling a feeling of love that
isn't that
would go, what the hell is love?
Yeah. Isn't that something to think about, man? You really just ignite something in me. So like, okay, so you've got surrender. There's a lot of talk about authenticity, raw, real, transparency, and then you use the word fallible. And my experience with the universe, it's very paradoxical, but to just the thought that maybe to be open or surrender to that, maybe by human definition, what we call God's fallible.
Yeah.
Like how do you jump into the unknown knowing what you're going to do?
Yeah.
You don't.
The lower G gods for sure must be fallible in a way.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Because we're working the bugs out. Yeah. So at the same time that we are the experiment, we were actually creating the more expanded templates or blueprints or whatever you want to call it. I wanted to ask you about, because people, talk about this is now the age of the Trinity. There's been a lot of focus on the divine union within a person, and I'm just using the nomenclature that's out there in the light worker circles. We're not into labels over here. I know you're not into labels. There's been a lot of focus on the externalization of union or partnerships or whatever. And now that they create a third energy, and that's taking on, a physical manifestation, however that may be. I know we've had incidents in the last 3 or 4 months where we're having a external third energy coming into our field, one way or the other, that is incarnated, and that's mostly androgynous. I don't know. I look at what you do with the sonic geometry, and I look at the symbolism of it. It's not even the right word. It's because it's such a combination of everything. And I look at these patterns and the mirror as within, without. He left. But he'll be back. But what I was going to get to was, there seems to be something happening on the local level that you would think is going to happen on the collective level. I just wanted to see what he had to say about that. So anyway, let's see if he comes back. He's a cool dude, isn't he? Very cool. Anyway, we got about 142 people in the house, all of the platforms. Eric Rankin, you can find him on YouTube. I just put in Sonic Geometry, Eric Rankin, because I think it's under somebody else's YouTube. He's got quite a few videos. I know he's been on Ancient Aliens. He mentioned Gaia TV. And I'm going to be hounding him to see if we can get him on here maybe every 4 or 6 weeks, because he's really bringing a lot to the table. And the fact that he's so down to earth and humble, that makes it even better. So I'll give him a couple of minutes, and we do have another show, one more show today, our third one, which is going to be in about 55 minutes. And that's going to be with a brother that I haven't met yet by the name of Joseph Adams. And he's going to come in. I went to his page and his website, and we're going to see what he's got going on. And let me just say that thanks to Eric Rankin, thank Jen Reynolds, all blessings to both of you. Anyway, we'll catch up with you again. And like I told Eric, we'll be in Sedona the last couple of weeks of September. So maybe Jen, you and Eric, if you're not too booked, could get over there. And if not, we'll catch up with you some other time. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. We'll be back in 54 minutes with Joseph. And it should be a good show. It feels like a powerful day. Peace out.